Notice the band of thickness on that chart. Usually it'll top out at 4 meters, which is 12 feet. This year, they added in a 5-meter band. Now, if it's decreasing, why would they do that? Why would they add in a 5-meter band? The Arctic ice is thickening. Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. And the media overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output. But very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne. Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Have you noticed the uptick in the weather wherever you are? It does not matter globally. There has been an absolute uptick in extreme, unusual, and bizarre weather systems across our planet. I'm David DuByne, your host today on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I also create the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 series of videos on YouTube and run the podcast Mini Ice Age Conversations, talking about all of these events that are happening across our planet with timelines going out for intensification, amplification of the weather that we're seeing. I'll start with that right now because you have to go back to Valentina Zarkova's work, and she was with a team of others, Popov, Shepard, and Zarkov. And what they did was they took a look at magnetic influences, waves on the sun, northern hemispheric, southern hemispheric magnetic oscillation waves, and when they started to match up, they canceled themselves out, ushering in this grand solar minimum. I had a great talk last night for a couple of hours. They were coming at it as a trader aspect. They were going to trade options and futures, and they were trying to figure out a little more, but they were so in tune of these changes are coming, they just couldn't figure out the magnetic, electromagnetic effects. It's pretty clear on what's happening, and also if traders are asking and saying, hey, yeah, we see the same thing, 2019, 2020, there's going to be massive shortages for food and price. The hard part is knowing where to be and trying to keep yourself vibrationally above the rest of this fear that's going to be going on across the planet. They know what's going to transpire up to 2019, but after that, where's it going to move to? That's the unknown. So as we talk about these canceling waves on the sun, Valentina Zarkova's work, you can definitely look this up in any search engine. Valentina Zarkova, and there's put magnetic double dynamo in the sun. These canceling waves, there's two sets. Now, the first wave started in late 2015, and it's starting to split, and the maximum split will be at 2021. The sun's magnetic fields tried to couple again and restabilize for a couple of years, but then they start to separate again. So you're getting a double trough, almost like a W. But when it hits that mid-low point trying to recouple and restabilize itself, it suddenly separates again. And this, I believe, is going to be the ultimate around 2024 of weather disruption on our planet, 2025. And if you thought changes like these were limited to today's world, the fate of Rome, climate, disease, and the end of an empire. This book is a sweeping new history of how climate change and disease helped bring down the Roman Empire. An interweaving grand historical narrative with climate science. The fate of Rome was decided not by emperors, soldiers, and barbarians, but also volcanic eruptions, solar cycles, climate instability, and devastating viruses. Let's talk about the weather disruptions that are happening right now. So I want to use units of change if I could. units of change. We have to determine what one unit is, so then we can take a look at how it's going to move forward. So let's think about this. In 2017, from July all the way until December 31st, that 6-month period, we started to see a lot of strange weather from the summer entering into the winter, when there were a lot of snow records broken, there were heat, out-of-season storms, unusual rains. And it was noticeable that there was a lot of strangeness going on, and there was an uptick in something at that point. So we're going to use that as one unit of change. That last 6 months of 2017 would be equivalent one unit, and we'll determine that as the base one. As we go to 2019, that is going to go to a 4 times increase. So what we're seeing right now with the instability in the weather is only 1/4 of what's to come. So as we progress into springtime in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere progresses into its winter, you are going to see things that you didn't think were possible before. But you have to remember, this is only the cusp in the beginning of the intense changes, because what you see this entire year, so let's use another baseline here on a yearly scale. What you see the changes for this entire year as we progress forward from the entire year of 2018, the massive changes that are underway and the massive changes that are coming. When we get to 2019 to 2020, that entire year of change in 2018 will be 6 times as these magnetic waves split. And I can't even really come across to tell you what that means, other than all of the change that you've seen in 2017, 2018 combined will only be half of what's coming at that point of the amount of change 2019 to 2020. Moving forward, we're looking at something exponential coming up here with our weather systems, and the first crop loss is already being tallied up right now. I want to give a shout out to Christian over Ice Age Farmer. He has been delving into industry publications, mainly agriculture, seed, and different FAO and UN reports on agricultural global production. The state of the food, if you will. There's a 3% decline in the wheat across the planet so far from last year. Now, if we had all this exceptional yields and GMOs and enhanced fertilizers and better machinery and larger mechanization in the whole system, how is there declines coming? Heavier grains such as sorghum, millet, buckwheat, down. So have we reached peak food? And that's the question to be asked. Ears of corn that can fit inside your hand, actually inside your palm, 3 inches long? These are the size of the ears of corn that were coming. That's a mature ear. Zero Hedge carried that story. Amazing pictures. I shook my head. I saw that. I said, wow, it's already being affected. So let's talk about some of the weather changes that are happening. I don't know, first of all, have you seen the dust storm that is blowing across from Africa? It's coming over from Algeria. So what's happening is that European Superfreeze 2.0 weather system is pushing south, bringing record snow to Spain, where actually the ports are closed. We'll go into that in just a minute. But as that massive front dumps record snow on the beaches of France, the ports in Spain, it's sending snow, all-time record snow into Algeria again, and the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. Now, as this cold front pushes, and it's very discernible, I did a whole entire video talking about what these forecasts are pushing out. That is such a massive disturbance of the atmosphere that it is pushing one of the thickest dust storms that they've had in 50 years. The images, I just encourage you to go over to Twitter and take a look at Severe Weather EU, and take a look at the images of the dust storm. Corsica has the clearest skies, so they're getting the best images. The rest of Europe's covered in cloud, but it looks like they're in a Martian atmosphere that is so densely orange. I don't know how people are breathing out in the air out there. You have to be indoors. You'd either have to seriously be wearing a mask and eye protection, full facial cover. That dust is blowing at 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour through the air. And it has turned the skies so dark orange that all the lights are on in the cities, the airports are closing, and you have to see the images for yourself, because I can't describe in words over the radio here what is taking place with the atmospheric events down there. Now this is going to collide, this is warm air getting pushed out of the desert with this massive, unbelievably massive dust storm. It is like a sandblaster in the atmosphere. That's the only way I can describe it, as a sandblaster in the atmosphere moving over the Mediterranean. As it moves forward and it collides with that super cold air mass, you got these really warm temperatures, completely dust laden. I mean, so dust laden that stuff is dripping out of the skies. It's going to be like a volcanic eruption fallout with the volcanic ash, but this is dust from the desert. Unbelievable. When that collides with that European superfreeze, the cloud nuclei is right there. All that dust is going to bring absolute record snows wherever it collides with that cold air mass. And this is going to be unusual snow too. It will have particulate in the center of the nuclei of the snow, or the ice if it comes down as hail. You'll have that little tiny piece of dust right in the center that everything forms around to create the droplet, whether it be rain, snow, hail. I'm waiting to see when these two masses collide together what is going to happen. This is going to be truly an amazing event. This is only the first quarter of amplification of what's to be expected as we go in. The springtime, the ferocity of the lightning storms and the electrical storms that are coming across and have swept across the U.S. I understand now why they built dolmens, and I understand why they built underground structures, and I understand why now there were underground cities across our planet by the millions that have been since removed, used for building construction or removed for roads. They've used it for other purposes, building, other buildings. And those things have been around for thousands, 7,000 years. Why have they been around? And in our modern time, we're clearing roads, we're clearing cities, we're putting neighborhoods. A lot of that stuff gets buried or just reused over time. So still several 100,000 on the planet that have survived since that time. So how many were there if there's still 100,000 of these structures survived after all the build out we've done and all the massive city building, road construction, or whatever else we've done on our planet to terraform it? There's still that many left. They're called dolmens. You can find them. They're underground structures that were built out of stone. The electrical ferocity of this, our Earth has to discharge and equalize the sun's charge. The reason some of these jet streams are moving and the wind patterns are so out of place with such just chaos in the atmosphere is our magnetosphere is weakening. The solar wind is decreasing, not down to zero by any means, so don't misquote me and say I said there's no solar wind. The solar winds are decreasing. The sunspots are decreasing. The electrical state of our sun is decreasing. The Birkeland current feeding our star with its power source is decreasing electrically. The plasma state of our sun is changing. It's decreasing. Our magnetic field on the planet that creates the magnetosphere is also weakening. It has to stay equalized with the phase state shift in the sun's electrical output. It goes weaker, our magnetic field and our magnetosphere also is weakened. Now you have to realize when you have a really intense, very strong magnetic field on the planet, it locks our jet streams in place. They don't go out of phase very much. We've been so lucky and so blessed. You should be so thankful and so unbelievably grateful that you grew up during this time or you're alive now, because we have had some of the most stable weather in thousands of years, these last 150 years. This is now rapidly changing. So as the sun continues to decline in its activity magnetically, electromagnetically, let's just call it that, electromagnetism that connects our sun and our planet needs to discharge as well to equalize with the sun. Now what you're seeing is this equalization happening right now. These electrical storms are becoming ferocious and dangerous. The size of the hail that is coming out of the skies is the size of dinner plates, multiple pounds now. The ones coming out of Texas in the superstorm, you can find that over on the Watchers. They have several images of large hail. There's a lot of large hail, but then there's exceptionally large hail. One of them is the size of a dinner plate. And then the ones that had came down in Alabama, Arkansas area, that was nearly the size of a basketball. Width-wise. This is what was talked about in the 1400s in the Sporer minimum. They talked about in Germany specifically, the hail was so intense that it pulverized wooden buildings into the ground in towns at that point, that when the storm was over, the wood shards that were ever left of the town were so pounded into the ground and in the mud that people, when they looked, they didn't even know a town existed there before. Right now we're getting one or maybe two of these large hailstones coming down that are size of, multiple pounds. One or two. And the others are just, half a pound or a quarter pound or, 500 grams, 250 grams for those of you in Europe. What happens when these stones start to come down by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, and every hailstorm becomes something like this, where you're getting multiple pound hailstones coming out of the sky? Forget about the crops at that point. What about the greenhouses? What about your home? Everything is going to be absolutely crushed. And we start to see these repeats in history. So look for the electrical storm ferocity to increase from this point forward. I mean, the sun is really stepping down. For those of you who are unaware, during the global warming period up into 1990, 2000, 2003, 2005, our sun went through a 3,500 year maximum intensity cycle at that time. Like literally, the sun was the most active in the last 3,500 years in the 1990s and 2000. Search engine and look for that. Sun, the most active in the last 3,500 years. Well, it peaked in intensity during the global warming, and it actually has dropped off a cliff precipitously, where now they're going, whoa, this is dropping off the fastest it's dropped off in 1,000 years. Because it was at that 3,500 year high, and now it dropped off that quickly. We're dropping back into grand solar minimum territory. I firmly believe, though, that this is a heavier, more powerful cycle overriding what would be considered the regular 400-year cycle. I think it's a multiple of these 400-year cycles combining into a much larger, powerful cycle. My best guess, with others talking so far, is a 2,000-year cycle, 2,000 years repeat. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds. So we'd have to go back to something, let's say, around 79 AD. This is what really started to crush the Roman Empire, was their lack of food production. Vesuvius went off at that time. That same repeat. And start to look for the volcanoes during that time erupted, and you'll start to see a lot of matches as well. But the ferocity of the lightning that's going to be coming out, and I'm not even going to call it thunderstorms any longer. I think that's an old term that we're going to have to use. Thunderstorms are going to be just a thing of the past, because these are now electrical fronts that are passing overhead. And this is no joke. I mean, these storms, the amount of people talking about they can actually feel the charge in the air that's making their hair stand up as these fronts roll through. If you're in your home and your hair's standing up and you feel tingles from the sky because the electrical field around you is so highly charged that you feel it inside your home, wow, that's really intense. And the winds that are accompanying this too, they're blasting 80, 90, 100 mile an hour winds with these fronts coming through, and it's electrical. And you can see why the hailstones are getting so big. I mean, the updrafts need to carry these stones so they refreeze, they fall back down, they grab another layer of water, and then they get recirculated, and the updrafts pull them back up. So when you look at it, you see these concentric circles coming out from the center seed point. Like, how many times does it get re-updrafted? And you can start to count it. It's almost like a tree ring, where you can see the layers frozen, 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 frozen. So when these giant hailstones fall to the ground, you can actually see the striations and the lines in it where it went up. It's almost like an agate, that stone, the agate. When you cut it in half, you can see all the lines and different colors and the concentric circles there really clearly. This is the same thing with the hailstones. And for something that's 2 pounds to come falling to the ground, how much updraft does there have to be to raise a 2-pound object high in the sky several times to freeze, refreeze it before it drops out? The weather fronts that are coming, we're shifting into, I'm not even going to say higher, we're shifting out of maybe neutral into first gear. And there's 5 gears in a car normally. So the ramp up and the intensification, 2017 is just kind of, when you put it on the clutch and you've moved from neutral and you put it in first gear and you're letting off the clutch and your car's starting to move. That's kind of where we are right now. We're not anywhere near full speed. We're not even anywhere near to changing gears into second gear, which is next year. Now, with the intensification, you can find all this on the internet search engine. Just put in ADAPT 2030. I put all this stuff up online with keywords so you can find it on your own. The crop losses are starting now. The tallies that are coming in from Europe, when they do, will be reduced from last year's all-time output. Russia. Can you count on a single nation to provide the world's food? I mean, look what's happening in South Africa. Okay, so we're going to lose all of South African production due to politics down there. But all the Russian gains from this year, that's just an offset, so that's an equalizer right there. All right, what about the rest of the planet? So many areas are decreasing at the moment. And look at the winter wheat crop in the United States. It's lost 80%. It's down 80% already because they've already measured it in the fields. It's an 80% loss this year in the winter wheat of the United States. 8-0. So what do you think that's going to do to the price of any kind of miller's wheat and kind of durum going forward as well? I mean, you got to take a look at what's happening with the wheat on this planet. It's a staple. And the rice is having difficulties too. It's just getting flooded out everywhere planet-wide as well. These weather systems are definitely changing to affect our food right now. This uptick, especially in the last 3 weeks or last month, is very, very, very clear and in front of your eyes. You cannot have the 4th nor'easter rolling over the U.S. and not wake up and go, what? Usually they would get one every couple years. One nor'easter every 2 to 5 years was a normal time on the cyclic pattern of those nor'easters forming. Even once every 2 years, and they go, wow, another one after 2 years. Wow, that's really intense. You got 2 in 2 years, or 2 in 3 years. And that was considered unusual. Now there's 4 in 2 months. And the media doesn't want to talk about it so much. So they rename these winter storms now. That last one, they didn't call a nor'easter 4.0. No, they gave it the name Winter Storm Toby. Now, for me, winter storms are something that comes out of the Arctic and sweeps from like British Columbia over into the Midwest and then over to the East Coast. And that's kind of my consideration of what a winter storm would be. Not something that comes from the Atlantic Ocean as a cyclonic spinning low. That is not a winter storm. And see how they just misnamed it so you're not going, oh, another winter storm. Okay, that's one that came from Canada. That's why they've been renaming all these storms winter storms. The way you process the information, you think it's a winter storm coming from Canada that's sweeping down. Most people don't do the research on this. They're too busy. Take a look at the news for 5 minutes and boom, they're good. They're good to go. I just learned it from the news. News said it's another winter storm. Nothing new. Nothing to see here. Just move on. So they're really trying to tiptoe around the 3rd nor'easter and the 4th nor'easter of the season here. Now you notice that Washington, D.C. just doubled its old snow record. Doubled. It didn't break it, it doubled it. And New York City has the snowiest season in it broke its old record 130 years ago right now. This storm has now officially broken all the New York City records for seasonal snow back 130 years. We got record cold in Denmark, breaking all records as well. Germany, snowfall totals are falling left, right, and center. They're still calculating because it's still snowing. Spain has smashed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of city snow records right now, and they're still counting because it's still coming down. You got ports closed because of too much snow. Roads are closed because of too much snow. You got snow all over the beaches in France, Bay of Biscay, and now they have a typhoon or like extra tropical low that is blowing at 100-mile-an-hour winds coming on shore right there, mixing with that cold air mass. So totals are not even close to being in for all these record snowfalls across southern Europe at the moment. Then you got the huge dust storm with that heat going to collide with those below normal temperatures, and it is going to do something amazing over there. Look for that in the weather. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm just saying keep your eye on it because it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be shocking of what happens when that superheated dust storm collides with that super cold Arctic air right over the mountain. It'll be right over the Italian Alps going into Eastern Europe. Slovenia, look out. Tbilisi, you're on the hit map on that one too. And then, where it's not coming in with all this record snow, it was raining, and the floods in Albania, wow. This is an indicator of what's to come with all these record snows melt and all this, snow and all this water is going down river. The floods are already, historic there, is what they're calling it in Albania, historic floods. And the seasonal melt's not all melted yet. That's the thing. Not even close. Almost all the snow hasn't melted yet. So the electromagnetic effects from our sun on our magnetosphere, and I'll go into another part here. I'm trying to explain this fully today because last night's conversation with the guys who knew a lot about trading, they knew the Grand Solar Minimum, they talked about global cooling, but they didn't have the mechanism to make it all chug forward. They didn't have the engine. They had all the cars behind on the train, but they just didn't have the engine. So I want to try to explain the engine, the driver of all these changes. So as the sun goes into its decreased activity state, electrically, magnetically, you'll notice all the planets in our solar system are experiencing changes as well, not just our Earth. But the news doesn't like to talk about that because when you see electrified storms and different changes and glow spots on different planets, hey, there's no cars up there. So they don't want to talk about it because how are weather systems on other planets changing when there's no cars, no factories? I thought it was all due to us. CO2, bad human. So as our state decreases, the magnetosphere is going to weaken further, and this will have a double-pronged effect. First, our magnetosphere will weaken and our jet streams are going to go further out and wandering out of their normal patterns. So you are going to see several things happen when this occurs. The blocking high that went into the Arctic and then separated the Arctic air mass and pushed it down over the US and pushed it down over Europe for super freeze 1.0 and nor'easter 1.0 and 2.0 in the East Coast US. That recombined in on itself and thickened the ice even further up there. And nobody wants to talk about the thickness of the ice. They had to add in an entire new band for Arctic ice thickness this year. It went above 4 meters thick. So now if you look on the charts, please do your own research. I encourage you, please do this research. Go back to any of the charts that say 2013, 2014 with Arctic ice. Cryosphere has some things. There's a few others out there. NSIDC. You can check out DMI, Danish Meteorological Institute. There's a lot of ice charts out there because they love to say how hot it was. Oh, they love to talk about how the decrease in the ice. So there's a lot of information from 2013, 14, 15. I want you to notice the band of thickness on that chart. Usually it'll top out at 4 meters, which is 12 feet. This year, they added in a 5-meter band. Now, if it's decreasing, why would they do that? Why would they add in a 5-meter band? The Arctic ice is thickening. And as that blocking high got out of the way and the Arctic recompressed on itself, it dropped temperatures back to 40 degrees Celsius below zero. And then right now what's happening, the same thing, another blocking pattern came in and split that Arctic, shall we say, vortex and shifted it. And after this blocking pattern lifts, it's going to reconnect again. And wow, you're going to get record cold temperatures in the Arctic in April. It should be warming. It is spring. It should be warming up there. But what's going to happen is all this air is going to recombine in on itself next week, and you're going to get another full Arctic vortex sitting directly over the Arctic, refreezing and adding more snow and more ice in April. So this is why you're seeing that giant uptick in Arctic ice concentration right now. They love to talk about a seasonal variance, but they really don't want to talk about weeks where there's upticks in ice that shouldn't be there that are anomalous. So also when you're taking a look, this is how they disguise the words and disguise the information. When you're looking at a full year's ice coverage in the Arctic, the low usually happens in, let's say, first weeks of September. So what they're doing currently is they're saying, look, it's the lowest on record. But that's not actually true. It's low now, but during the low point, there was actually more ice last year at the low point of what you would consider the maximum melt-off because the refreeze started 2 weeks early last year. So what they'll do is they'll always peg and get that left side of the chart where they're showing you coming in January, February, March to try to show you that ice is below normal. But then when it comes into the summer months, when there's actually more ice than there was at the 2012 low point, they just dismiss that. They don't talk about it. This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.